Sadly, there was another vessel that has sunk with migrants on it. 2 5-year-olds and an 8-year-old were among the 4 dead. And they were leaving from the coast of France to the UK. And I think 2 of them or 3 of them were Iranians. And as you know, in Iran, there are terrible economic sanctions placed on them by the US at a time of a pandemic, which is just appalling. And so there are people really, really suffering in Iran, just as they're suffering in Venezuela. And there's a thing called the Missing Migrants Project. And this is about a year old now. I couldn't actually find today something that was 2020, but it said in 2019 is the 6th year of the IOM's efforts to systemically record deaths on migrant routes worldwide through its Missing Migrants Project. Since the beginning of 2014, the project has recorded the deaths of 32,046 individuals, including 1,089 in 2019. And it has a chart below, and I'll leave a link to that. And they mentioned in this that 30 years ago, there was virtually none of this was happening. And now it's just on the increase. And the main reason for this is US empire and its meddling, and its allies, one of which is my country, Australia, going along with it. And, causing great turmoil in those countries, great devastation, and that is why people are fleeing. And also, that's one of the reasons. And in Venezuela, there's terrible economic sanctions as well, and 100,000 Venezuelans now have died in the last 3 years, I think, since crippling economic sanctions. And it said, due to the challenges of collecting information about these people in the context of their deaths, the true number of lives lost during migration is likely much higher. Missing Migrant Project records should only be viewed as indicative of the risks associated with migration rather than representative of the true number of deaths across time or geography. Interestingly, I tried to click on a link to this particular site from Facebook because they have a Facebook page, and it said, it's not verified because the data on this link could not be verified, and therefore it wouldn't take me to that page, which I find in some ways predictable but also disgusting. And that's got to do probably with the Atlantic Council, which I've talked about recently, which is directing Facebook into what to report on and what not to, and something they don't really want sort of focused on are migrants fleeing wars, because the Atlantic Council is funded by numerous weapons industry manufacturers, and they get about between $50,000 to $100,000 a month from each of those weapons manufacturers to get access to politicians, and basically it's a kind of a bribe. So it's no wonder that Facebook wouldn't want somebody to click on a link that is indicating that these migrants, there are a lot of them coming from countries where there is U.S. imperialist meddling. It mentions on this site, and this is a year and a half ago, in the Caribbean, families reported that 32 Venezuelans are missing after their boat they were traveling on sank on its way to the island of Caraco. So this is from also 2019. It said 4 million Venezuelans have fled their country, the UN says. More than 4 million Venezuelans have fled their country amid an economic and humanitarian crisis. UN agencies say the pace of people fleeing has skyrocketed since the end of 2015, with around 1 million leaving in the last 7 months alone, they found. The agency said countries hosting the migrants and refugees were in, quote, urgent need, end quote, of international support. Venezuela's imploding economy has meant shortages of basic supplies such as food and medicines in recent years. I don't see any mention of the US and its tremendous economic sanctions. Anyway, there's going to be a lot more of that in the coming years with the climate crisis. There's already people fleeing their countries due to the climate crisis. And when Bangladesh goes underwater, that's going to be outrageous, because there's literally 100 million plus people there. In the West, in the corporate media, we very rarely hear any sort of analysis of why these people are fleeing, why these people are getting on these boats that are rickety and it's so dangerous, and yet they're prepared to drown to flee their country. I mean, the fact that there's no analysis, you don't hear it. It just shows how corporate-owned the media is, and how they are just stenographers, really, for the U.S. national security state. Because a lot of these people are fleeing U.S. imperialist meddling in their country. And it's sort of so criminal, because like those 2 children who died, the 3 children who died, the 2 5-year-olds and the 8-year-old, their parents were just trying to get them to safety. They were Iranians, and there's a terrible suffering going on in Iran because of the economic sanctions during a pandemic that the US has placed on them, and the US knows very well how much suffering it's causing, and it does not care. And that is the sadistic nature of empire.